Welcome to Week 7 of CYB530 Securing and Administering Windows OSs. In this module, we will discuss logging and auditing.
But first, let's take another look at the materials from the previous week. The Windows Group Policy feature is a centralized set of rules that govern the way Windows operates. It gives you the ability to define and apply both general and security-related configuration changes to one or more computers. You can define both local group policy settings and group policies in Active Directory. Local group policies control the behavior of a single computer. Active Directory group policies can apply to any users on any computers defined in Active Directory. Using group policy can make administration tasks easier than having to write scripts or individually secure basic security settings. GPOs make it easy to enforce standard behavior across multiple users or computers, as we've already seen. For example, GPOs can easily set firewall settings on multiple computers, define consistent desktop layouts, run scripts when users log on and log off, and redirect folders to network folders. And these are only a few uses of the GPOs. So when booting a computer or logging on, Windows looks up and applies the GPOs for that computer and that user. Group policy uses a pull technology, which means that Windows periodically searches for any updated GPOs. If it finds a new GPO, it downloads and applies the changes to the existing environment. By default, Windows checks for new or updated GPOs at a random interval from 90 to 120 minutes. This automatic update feature ensures that Windows applies any new or updated GPOs, often without requiring that users log off or reboot computers. As of Windows Server 2012, we can now force GPOs to refresh on all of the selected computers within less than 10 minutes. This new feature is called the Remote Group Policy Update, and it makes deploying GPOs easier and a whole lot more dependable. Group policy objects can define many settings. Here are a few of the more common settings. We're starting with the password policy, which sets the requirements for password strength, age, history, and how Windows stores passwords. Then we can also define an account lockout policy, which describes how Windows handles accounts locked after failed login attempts. Another popular GPO is the Kerberos policy, which sets the lifetime limits for Kerberos tickets and clock synchronization. And then we have the audit policy, which defines the events that Windows records in the audit files and that we can later access through the event viewer. Of course, we have a policy for user rights assignment that describes the individual user rights that define what general actions users can perform. For example, access this computer from the network or change the system time. And then we have security options. Security options defines what security-related actions users can perform. For example, allow to format and eject removable media or require a smart card. And the event log GPOs define the maximum size and the retention settings and the guest access settings too for the event logs. The restricted groups GPO lists the users in security-sensitive groups and to what other groups the restricted group can belong. Then we have the System Services GPO, which defines the startup mode and access permissions for system services, and the File System GPO, which defines access permissions on discretionary access control lists, the DACLs, and the audit settings for system access control lists, SACLs. You can link these GPOs to specific users to customize settings for group users or even individual users. Users who log on anywhere in the Active Directory domain will get GPOs linked to their user account. You can also link GPOs to organizational units. This is what we will do later. In fact, you must link GPOs to at least one computer, domain, or organizational unit for the GPO to be active. GPOs that aren't linked to a computer, domain, or OU are defined, but they're just inactive. You can define OUs to logically group computers into functional groups, which is what we will do in the later part of this module, such as IT, HR, and finance. And once you define one or more OUs, you can add computers to each OU to logically group them together. Then when you link GPOs to OUs, Windows will download and apply only the appropriate GPOs for the computer and the user logging on. For example, you may define a desktop with icons related to HR applications for the HR OU, or certain printers that are in a certain office. A user who logs on to a computer in the HR OU then will see the desktop specific to human resources and be able to access the printers specific to their geographical location. Users who log on to a computer that is not in the HR OU will see a different desktop and have access to different printers. Group policy allows you to define the specific targets for each rule. Some rules on your security policy apply to all users on all machines, while others do not. For example, the rule, all users must create passwords for user accounts that conform to the strong password policy, applies to all users. On the other hand, the rule, members of the database administrator group must change passwords at least every 90 days, applies only to users who are members of the database administrator user group. Windows provides you with the ability to specify GPO scope, which defines how Windows enforces security rules. Active Directory provides the ability to define group policy at different levels. Windows looks up all applicable GPOs when a computer boots or a user logs on. It then applies multiple GPOs in the following order. First, it applies the local GPOs that are defined and stored on a local computer. Then it defines the site GPOs that are defined in Active Directory. After that, it applies the domain-wide GPOs that are defined in Active Directory, and then, lastly, the OU GPOs that are defined in Active Directory. This means that any setting in a higher level GPO will override a lower level GPO setting. For example, a setting in a domain GPO will override a conflicting setting in a local GPO. This behavior applies only, though, if a GPO setting contains a specific value. If the higher level GPO setting value is not configured, then Windows applies the value of the lower level GPO setting. Creating GPOs that conform to your security policy enables you to validate and evaluate each part of this policy. You'll learn later how to list and audit GPOs. Reporting on GPOs makes it easy to evaluate how well your organization is complying with your security policy.
Let's take a moment to consider why auditing group policy is so important. Once you design and deploy GPOs to support your security policy, it is important to validate your group policy to ensure that you have defined the right GPOs. Auditing group policy ensures the GPOs you have in place satisfy your security policy. As you change users and computers in your organization, you may find that your GPOs no longer satisfy your security policy. This is why it's important to audit group policy periodically to ensure that any changes in your organization have not reduced your GPO's effectiveness. Microsoft gives you two main tools you will use to audit group policy: Group Policy Inventory and Resultant Set of Policy tool. The first tool, Group Policy Inventory, provides an inventory list of GPOs and many other computer and user settings. You must download this program from Microsoft's website and install it on your computer. It's not included when you install Windows. The second tool is included with Windows. The Resultant Set of Policy tool shows what settings Windows applies to a specific user on a specific computer. This is the tool that you're seeing on the lower right-hand side of this slide. The RSOP, Resultant Set of Policy tool, shows the specific settings that will result from applying GPOs to a specific user logged onto a specific computer. The Group Policy Inventory tool can include some RSOP results, but the standalone RSOP tool provides access to a whole lot more details. So this tool is a great way to analyze the effect of any GPO changes. RSOP provides two modes of operation: a logging mode to show the existing GPOs and a planning mode that shows the effect of planned GPO changes. So here you see the logging mode. Group policy is an important concept of secure Windows environments. Many resources are available to help you follow established best practices for secure systems. Let's talk about a few of the recommended guidelines and available resources. While there are many ways to design group policy for your organization, a few guidelines can help focus your efforts. You might want to follow these guidelines to design a group policy that will minimize administrative effort while satisfying your security policy. Most importantly, don't make your group policy overly complex. Simplicity is always an asset in any policy. Keep your security policy and group policy as simple as possible while still fulfilling your goals. Here are a few additional guidelines that should result in simple and effective group policy. You want to define your OUs so that they reflect your organization's functional structure. Then you want to create GPOs for these OUs for those controls that are required in your security policy. You also want to use meaningful names for GPOs to make the maintenance and administration easier. Very importantly, you want to deploy your GPOs in a test environment first before deploying them to your live environment. Then you also want to use security filtering and WMI filters to restrict the settings when necessary. Of course, you do want to back up your GPOs regularly and really don't modify the default policies if you can. Instead, create new GPOs. This will ensure that your group policy is both effective and easily maintainable. You really want to only define and deploy the GPOs you actually need to meet the goals of your security policy. Extra GPOs will only complicate administrative tasks and may get in the way of completing primary business functions. The process of migrating from an environment with few controls to a secure environment can be frustrating for both end users and administrators. Make sure you test all GPOs before deploying them to a live environment. Conduct tests that will allow you to evaluate how each GPO will affect your users' abilities to do their jobs. New security settings that stop people from doing their jobs are harmful to your business. Be aware of any new policies that may result in a negative business impact. And when security requirements conflict with business requirements, it is up to the organization's management to resolve the conflict. The best security solutions always support both security and business concerns. There are several other resources available on the Microsoft website and its user forums to make designing and implementing group policy across the domain easier. Use these resources as well as the tools and resources you've already seen. They keep you from reinventing the wheel. They also provide input on solving issues that you may not have encountered yet.
And now let's get started with auditing and logging. As we know, the goal of information security is to prevent loss by protecting the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information. Security controls protect resources and manage controls in a larger environment using group policy. In this module, we will pursue the following questions. How do you know if your system is meeting your security goals? You can verify that controls are working, but how do you know if they are getting the job done? How do your controls compare with other environments? Are your systems configured with similar controls using recognized best practices? Is your environment radically different? Are you ready to tackle all of these questions? Well then, let's go. It's difficult to know if your controls are correct without the ability to compare other configurations. You want to be able to compare configuration settings of your systems with the configurations of systems you know to be secure. System administrators often collect reported configuration settings for comparison with similar settings. A collection of configuration settings is called a baseline and can take on many forms. Each baseline generally contains a collection of configuration settings intended for a specific purpose. For example, a collection of security-related settings is commonly referred to as a security baseline. Once you have a baseline or snapshot of one or more of your computers, what do you do with it? One of the most effective uses of baselines is to compare them with known good baselines. There are many definitions for a good baseline. It generally means a baseline of a secure system. The process of comparing configuration settings of a computer with a collection of secure configuration settings makes it easy to see the differences. An alternate approach would be to define an insecure baseline and look for similarities or differences with your systems. The process of comparing real computer configurations to known baselines is called profiling. Profiling in general means extracting information about someone or something based on known attributes. While profiling is not accurate in all cases, it quickly identifies attributes or characteristics associated with a subject of a predefined group. In old Western movies, for example, wearing a black hat doesn't make a character bad, but it makes the audience suspicious of that character. Similarly, wearing a white hat makes the audience trust a character. Profiling in the operating system security context is really no different. The idea of profiling is to define a baseline of a known configuration. In most cases, the baseline is that of a secure configuration. Once you have a defined baseline, it can be compared with existing system configurations, reporting any differences. You can investigate the differences and take appropriate action to make your computers more secure. Profiling also allows you to compare snapshots or baselines of your systems over time. Comparing two snapshots of the same computer taken at two different times helps you see configuration changes over time. While some changes may be normal, other configuration changes may indicate unauthorized changes to your environment. Microsoft gives you a few tools that make profiling windows easy. To establish the security baseline, you would typically use the Microsoft Management Console and its somewhat older Security Configuration and Analysis tool. This tool helps administrators do several things. It allows you to analyze a computer and compare its configuration settings with a baseline. The Security Configuration and Analysis tool, the SCA, can also apply a baseline to force current computer settings to match the settings defined in the baseline. This feature can be handy anytime you want to overwrite existing settings and revert to a known configuration. The SCA uses security templates in the form of text files to store the settings that make up baselines. While these used to come preloaded in older versions of Windows Server, they will need to be installed in Windows 10 and Server 2016. You can use templates to enforce security. You will need to create a baseline security template. To do this, open the Microsoft Management Console by entering the MMC command at the run prompt, as shown on the left upper side of the slide. When the console opens, choose the Add Remove Snap-in command from the File menu. Then, as shown on the upper right-hand side of the slide, select the Security Templates Snap-in and click Add, followed by OK. Once the Security Template Snap-in has been loaded, you will see a file path under Security Templates, as shown in the lower portion of the slide. Now that the Security Template Snap-in has been loaded, it's time to create a template. Navigate through the console tree to the template path, right-click on the path, and then choose the New Template command from the shortcut menu. When prompted, enter a name for the template that you are creating. You can see what the newly created template looks like in the middle screenshot. You can then navigate to any policy and double-click on that policy to open the policy editor. Here, as shown in the lower right-hand screenshot, you can edit the policy and click Apply and OK to save your changed settings. So, As you look at all of these screenshots, you will notice that the console looks a lot like the group policy console, and that is not a coincidence. Most of the settings that are available within the local security policy also exist here. Remember, the local security policy is used to lock down the OS, but the security templates are there to make sure that the OS stays locked down. So you should configure the account policies and local policies so that they mimic the settings that you apply through the local security policy. In addition to the basic account policy and local policy settings, there are 5 other types of policy settings that you can implement. You can see here the restricted groups, the system services, the registry, and the file system. Go ahead and explore these. Security template, you can use that template to audit a PC's security configuration. In the Microsoft Management Console, install the Security Configuration and Analysis snap-in in the same way in which you installed the Security Template snap-in previously. So the first thing that you will need to do after loading the snap-in for the first time is to create a database. As you can see here, all the instructions are right there. And when you use the tool in the future, you can reuse this database, as you're seeing in the lower right-hand corner. When you have loaded your database, you will also be prompted to load your security template for analysis. Now that both have been loaded, you're ready to go and perform your analysis. As you can see, the SCA will show you any discrepancies in your database settings and in your computer settings for each policy. Here we're seeing a discrepancy in the enforced password history policy. My database setting was set to 24 passwords, and since I did not save my previous adjustments to my template, my computer settings remains at 0 passwords remembered. SCA flags this. I can double click on enforced password history and bring up this screen that you're seeing in the lower right hand corner in order to provide more information about the discrepancy identified. So you can use the Security Configuration and Analysis tool to either configure a computer or to analyze a computer. For established Windows PCs, you will probably want to perform an analysis first. To do so, right-click on the Security Configuration and Analysis container and select the Analyze Computer Now command from the shortcut menu. When prompted, enter the desired log file path and click OK. When the analysis finishes, you can review the log file as shown in the lower right side of the slide, or also you can browse the console. Now note that a green icon in the console will indicate that the setting is defined within the template and the PC is compliant. A gray icon will indicate that the setting is undefined in the template, and a red icon indicates, as we have seen before, that the setting is defined within the template but the PC is not compliant with that setting. Another way to use the SCA tool is from the command line. That can be useful for PowerShell scripting, for example. To do so, use the secedit command and define both the name and the path to the log file that you want to use. The output in the log file is exactly the same as from the snap-in tool. Another useful tool that was phased out after Windows 7 and Server 2012 in favor of the Security Toolkit is the Microsoft Baseline Security Analyzer. This was an easy-to-use tool to evaluate the current security state of computers in accordance with Microsoft security recommendations. It didn't just identify problems, but also ranked them by severity and gave recommendations how to fix each one. While the MBSA provided a convenient way to identify and address most common security vulnerabilities, its functionality has not been lost, but it was integrated into the Windows Server 2016 Policy Analyzer tool. Now let's take a look at the new way in which Microsoft has organized their security tools. Currently, that is in the Microsoft Security Compliance Toolkit for Windows 10 and Server 2016. You can download this toolkit with all possible options from the Microsoft download site. The URL current as of the making of this video is shown right here. Keep in mind though that URLs can move as websites are redesigned, so your best bet is to type Security Compliance Toolkit into the search box at Microsoft Downloads. At a minimum, you'll want to install LGPO and Policy Analyzer, and probably also the posted baselines for the product that you're using. As you can see, here I have downloaded 5 zip files as part of the Security Compliance Toolkit. These include 3 baselines, one for MS Office 2016, one integrated one for Windows 10 version 1607 and Windows Server 2016, and then the latest one available for the current build of Windows 10, which is version 1803. The big tools that you will need are the LGPO and the Policy Analyzer. These should be installed before you install any server or endpoint-based policy scripts. These policy scripts and their installers are located in the local script subdirectory of your baseline zip file. So, what does the policy baseline look like? Well, take a look at the Excel workbook in the baseline documentation folder. This workbook contains all the default security policies that can be implemented, separated into tabs based on their applicability, like Security Template, Advanced Auditing, Windows Firewall, Computer, Internet Explorer, which, remember, still exists, and so on. Each sheet is organized in a similar fashion and includes the policy path, the name of the setting, the default, and then the available results for the MS Windows versions to which it can be applied. Here it is shown as Windows 10, a basic Server 2016, and a Server 2016 domain controller. The baseline also contains group policy objects, including their XML files. These can be imported directly into Active Directory, along with the corresponding WMI filters to apply these policies to the correct machines. The Local Group Policy Object Utility, or LGPO, is a command line utility designed to help automate the management of local group policy. Using local policy gives you a simple way to verify the effects of group policy settings, and it is of course also useful for managing non-domain joined systems. LGPO.EXE can import and apply settings from registry policy files, security templates, advanced auditing backup files, and from formatted LGPO text files. It can export local policy to a GPO backup and the contents of a registry policy file to the LGPO text format that can then be edited. And it can build a registry policy file from an LGPO text file. The cool thing is that you can invoke it from a PowerShell script to back up your GPOs, which is probably also the most frequent use. You invoke LGPO.EXE with the /b switch that includes the absolute path. Remember to use double quotes if you use any path name that contains spaces. You can even specify only particular GPOs for backup by adding the /n switch to the GPO name. Here is what this looks like in a runtime window. Note that LGPO.EXE needs to be run as administrator. In the upper window, we see the GPO backup procedure, in which LGPO.EXE is being invoked with the /g switch, and all GPOs being exported to the GPO backup directory on the C drive. Note the registry key, aka group policy ID, and the absolute path here. In the lower window, we see these GPOs being imported with the /b switch. Note again the absolute path of the directory in which the GPOs are located. As you can see in the upper screen, I am building a registry new.pol file from the LGPO text with the /r switch and the absolute path in which the file is going to be located, including the file name. In the lower part of the screen, I am showing how to import the registry new.pol file with the /m switch. Along with LGPO, which allows you to move policies around, we have Policy Analyzer. Policy Analyzer is the second very important tool here, and it is a utility for analyzing and comparing sets of group policy objects. It can highlight when a set of group policies has redundant settings or internal inconsistencies, and can highlight the differences between versions or sets of group policies. It can also compare GPOs against current local policy settings and against local registry settings. And you can export its findings to a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. Policy Analyzer, in other words, lets you treat a set of GPOs as a single unit. This makes it easy to determine whether particular settings are duplicated across the GPOs or are set to conflicting values. It also lets you capture a baseline and then compare it to a snapshot taken at a later time to identify changes anywhere across the set. For example, the US government configuration baseline for Windows 7 includes 7 different GPOs. Policy Analyzer can treat them as a single set and show all the differences between them and the Microsoft recommended baselines for Windows 10 and Internet Explorer 11 with a single comparison. You can also use it to verify changes that were made to your production GPOs. Now the screenshot here shows two baselines compared with each other and to corresponding registry values on the local system. The lower pane displays the group policy setting, location, and other information associated with the selected row. Conflicting settings are highlighted in yellow. Absent settings are shown as a gray cell. Policy Analyzer can also display only rows containing conflicts or other differences. This is the entire Excel spreadsheet showing the Policy Analyzer output. Policy Analyzer sorts results primarily by the group policy path and setting name columns, which are the leftmost columns. Again, notice how conflicting settings are highlighted in yellow. Absent settings are shown as a gray cell. And here's how to run Policy Analyzer. You first want to download the Policy Analyzer from Microsoft Downloads and then take a look at the extracted files. They will contain policyanalyzer.exe and some helper program files, a documentation PDF file, and some sample GPO sets that are taken from the Microsoft Security Configuration Baselines. Click policyanalyzer.exe and you will see the main window pop up on your screen. The list box shows the name of the directory in which your policy rules are located. Initially, that directory will be empty. To add a policy rule set to the Policy Analyzer collection, click the Add button as shown in the main window. Here I added the sample GPO sets that came with the download file. Then select the sets you want to compare and hit View Compare. I am here comparing the standard server 2016 Windows 10 policies from build 1607 with the set for Windows 10 build 1803. The upper part of my output shows the two baselines compared with each other and to corresponding registry values on the local system. The lower pane displays the group policy setting, location, and other information associated with the selected row. As already mentioned, conflicting settings are highlighted in yellow, and absent settings are shown as a gray cell. Now that we have discussed all the tools that we can use for a Windows security audit, let's talk about what an audit actually really is and how to prepare for one. An audit is an evaluation of a collection of one or more objects to determine if these objects meet specific criteria in the form of standards or guidelines. In most cases, an audit doesn't focus only on a point in time. Most audits consider information gathered over a specific period. In this way, audits can reveal patterns of performance when compared with standards. A security audit in the Windows computer environment is a collection of configuration and performance information compared with information contained in your security policy. The purpose of a Windows security audit is to measure how well the audited computer operation complies with your security policy. This process may seem similar to profiling a Windows computer. Although there are similarities, and profiling is often a part of a security audit, the two processes differ. Profiling is the process of comparing computer security settings with a baseline. Windows security auditing is a larger process of comparing computer security settings and performance with your security policy, typically over a period of time. As a general rule, the scope of an audit is larger than just profiling a collection of computers. A Windows security audit involves several activities. These activities are related and may occur multiple times throughout an audit. Each audit may take different paths, but the basic process includes verifying that security controls comply with the security policy, collecting configuration and performance information, creating initial and subsequent baselines, and recognizing and analyzing configuration or performance information changes. Collecting initial and subsequent baseline information involves more than just saving analysis reports. You will likely include various audit log files to track access to sensitive resources. Most log file entries of interest will likely be data access for sensitive data and execute events for administrative programs that can cause damage if used improperly. Log files can provide a wealth of performance information. They can help us isolate problems and identify behaviors that both support and violate security policy. But logs grow very quickly, so consider logging only access failures for most objects you choose to audit. You can audit both access successes and failures for resources that are critical to your organization, but don't track audit information for all resources. The key to conducting an effective audit is to establish a consistent process. Define the information you'll need for the analysis phase and then ensure that you're collecting and storing only the necessary information. Planning audit activities thusly improves the likelihood that you'll capture all the information you need and only the information you need. So auditing should not be viewed as activities that attempt to uncover problems. It should instead be a continuous process of improving the security standing of your computing environment. Here you're seeing a great summary of best practices for security audits. Of course, you're also seeing only Windows Universe only tools. But there are more tools than just Windows Universe only tools, such as SCA, LGPA, or Policy Analyzer. One of the most popular industry-based audit tools in the past several years has been NETWRIX Auditor, and we're going to look at that right now. NETWRIX currently offers a 20-day free license for its flagship product, NETWRIX Auditor. NETWRIX Auditor is extremely useful for Active Directory because it detects and reports on all changes made to the managed Active Directory domain. That includes Active Directory objects, group policy configurations, directory partitions, and so on. Auditor takes daily snapshots of the managed domain structure, and so you can use it to diagnose the state at present or at any moment in the past. You get logon activity summaries, reports on interactive and non-interactive logons, including the failed logon attempts. Also, NETWRIX Auditor for Active Directory helps you address specific tasks, such as detecting and managing inactive users and expiring passwords. Now, in addition, NETWRIX Auditor for Active Directory also provides a standalone Active Directory object restore tool. That tool allows you to roll back any unwanted changes to Active Directory objects. That goes down to their attribute level. So right now, NETWRIX Auditor supports Domain Controller OS versions from Windows Server 2016 all the way back to Windows Server 2008, and Windows desktop versions from Windows 10 all the way back to Windows Vista. By default, NETWRIX Auditor comes with documentation and quick start guides, and it's really relatively easy to install. To get to your goal quickly, you might want to use the new Active Directory plan, and you'll be up and rolling in about 15 minutes. As you set up your new monitoring plan in NETWRIX, you will notice that typically NETWRIX wants to collect its data in SQL Server. So you can decide to install SQL Server Express, or you can decide to just get the reports. After you've set up your email to which to forward any reports, you get to specify which item you want to monitor. And depending on the configuration of the machine on which you're installing this, your screen will look different from mine. What you will see, however, are the directly accessible tools in NETWRIX Auditor, and that includes the Event Log Manager, it includes the Inactive User Tracker, and here's the Object Restore tool, the third one down, and the password expiration as well. These are directly accessible as immediate reports. Once you have built and applied your monitoring plan to a specific item, you will notice that you have a great number of reports available to you. For Active Directory, these reports are organized into 5 categories, which include the Active Directory changes, the state and time for Active Directory, the group policy changes, and the state and time for group policy, and then the logon activity. As you expand any of these categories, you'll see a huge number of reports with which you can slice and dice any available information, and a sample of the Active Directory changes report is shown in the lower right-hand side of the screen. The must-have reports currently recommended by NETWRIX are the user accounts changes, the group policy changes, the group members, the password resets by administrator, and the computer accounts reports. These are only a few of the great number of reports that you can run with NETWRIX Auditor. So, our goal for this module was to describe the need for profiling the security of a Windows system, to explain how to use common Windows security profiling tools, and we talked about SCA specifically, and LGPO and Policy Analyzer, to explain the process of auditing Windows security, and to describe how to use Windows security audit tools. And lastly, we have just applied our knowledge of auditing to the NETWRIX Auditor tool, which is one of the industry standard tools. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through auditing and logging, and I look forward to seeing you again for our next module. Have a great day.